In the vast cradle of Mesopotamia where the Tigris and Euphrates carved fertile plains, Babylon emerged not as a mighty empire but as a modest city-state. Its beginnings trace back to around 1894 BCE when it was little more than a small settlement on the banks of the Euphrates. The land was crowded with rivals, Uruk-Lagash and dozens of other city-states, all competing for resources and influence. Babylon's advantage lay not in size but in position. Nestled along key trade routes, it was destined to become a meeting place for merchants, armies, and ideas. The city first rose to prominence under the Amorites, a Semitic-speaking people who migrated into Mesopotamia from the west. Often described as semi-nomadic, they blended with local populations and eventually carved out dynasties across the land. In Babylon, they established their first royal line, turning what was once a provincial town into the heart of a new political order. This transformation was neither quick nor easy, but within a century Babylon began to rival its neighbors and attract attention as a city of growing power. The true turning point came with Hammurabi, who reigned from 1792 to 1750 BCE. Through a blend of military conquest, political alliances, and administrative genius, he expanded Babylon's control across much of southern Mesopotamia. He unified lands that had long been divided by rivalries and shifting alliances. Unlike kings who ruled purely by force, Hammurabi anchored his authority in law, culture, and religion. His famous Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest surviving legal codes, symbolized Babylon not only as a power of arms but as a beacon of order and civilization. By the time of his death, Babylon was no longer just a city, it was the beating heart of Mesopotamia. Yet Babylon's fortunes rose and fell in cycles. After Hammurabi's dynasty waned, the city endured invasions and periods of decline. It was sacked by the Hittites in 1595 BCE and passed through the hands of Kassites, Assyrians, and Elamites. Each wave of conquest reshaped its politics, but none erased its cultural significance. Even when overshadowed, Babylon remained a symbol of prestige, a city whose name carried weight throughout the ancient. The city's golden age returned centuries later with the Neo-Babylonian Empire, beginning in 626 BCE under Nabopolassar and reaching its zenith under his son Nebuchadnezzar. Between 605 and 562 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar transformed Babylon into one of the most magnificent cities of antiquity. Massive walls stretched for miles, encircling palaces, temples, and marketplaces. At the heart of the city rose towering ziggurats dedicated to Marduk, the city's patron god. Legend places within this era the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, said to have been built by Nebuchadnezzar for his Median queen. By this time, Babylon was not merely a political capital but a cultural symbol. Its scholars advanced astronomy and mathematics, its priests interpreted omens that guided kings, and its scribes preserved myths like the Enuma Elish, which declared Marduk as supreme among the gods. Babylon represented continuity between the ancient Sumerian traditions and the new world that would later be inherited by Persians, Greeks, and beyond. Yet Babylon's story is also one of vulnerability. Its wealth and central position drew conquerors as much as merchants. In 539 BCE, the armies of Cyrus the Great of Persia marched into Babylon and absorbed it into the vast Achaemenid Empire. The city would live on under new masters, but its independence had ended. The fall of Babylon marked the close of nearly 1,500 years of ascendancy, but its name would echo for millennia in scriptures, myths, and histories as both a place of wonder and a warning from a small riverside settlement to the jewel of Mesopotamia. Babylon's journey reflects the drama of human civilization itself. It grew from fragile beginnings into a city that shaped law, architecture, literature, and empire. Its origins remind us that even the mightiest powers often spring from humble soil, and that geography, vision, and timing can turn an ordinary town into a legend. Culture, religion, and the laws of Babylon. When we think of Babylon, we imagine monumental walls, glittering temples, and palaces that touch the sky. Yet beneath these stones, what truly gave Babylon its character was its culture and its faith. For the Babylonians, life was not just about survival in a harsh environment, it was about weaving meaning into existence through myths, gods, rituals, and laws. The people of Babylon inherited much from their Sumerian and Akkadian predecessors, but they also transformed these legacies into something uniquely Babylonian, shaping a culture that influenced the entire ancient Near East. The sacred world of the Babylonians' religion sat at the very heart of Babylonian identity. Every aspect of daily life, from planting crops to waging war, was infused with divine purpose. The Babylonians saw their city as chosen by the gods and its prosperity as a reflection of divine favor. Chief among the gods was Marduk, the great protector of Babylon. He was not originally the most powerful deity in Mesopotamian tradition, but as Babylon rose in power, so too did Marduk. By the time of Hammurabi, Marduk had been elevated above older gods like Enlil the Storm Lord and Ea the god of wisdom. In the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, Marduk defeats the chaos monster Tiamat, splitting her body to form the heavens and the earth. From that act of cosmic battle, Babylon derived not only its myth of origins but also its justification for rule. The king was the earthly agent of Marduk, charged with maintaining order against chaos. Alongside Marduk stood a pantheon of powerful figures. Ishtar, known earlier as Inanna, embodied both love and war. She was the goddess who blessed fertility, passion, and beauty, but also the fury of battle. Her temples were centers of ritual, and in literature she appears as both alluring and terrifying. Then there was Shamash, the sun god, who illuminated truth and justice. Enlil, though less dominant in Babylon, retained his aura as lord of the winds, storms, and fates. The pantheon mirrored the dualities of human existence, nurturing yet destructive, compassionate yet wrathful. The places where these gods were honored were themselves marvels of architecture. Central to every major Babylonian city was the ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid rising from the plains. Its terraces symbolized the cosmic mountain, a bridge between earth and heaven. The most famous of these was the Etemenenki in Babylon, a colossal ziggurat dedicated to Marduk, which some believe inspired later stories of the Tower of Babel. These temples were not merely houses of worship, they were also centers of political authority, economic activity, and cultural preservation. Priests managed offerings, collected wealth, and advised rulers, often holding as much influence as generals or governors. To walk through Babylon was to feel the presence of the divine in every stone and every street. Ritual life in Babylon revolved around festivals that bound community and king to the gods. The most important was the Akita, the New Year festival, held every spring. At its heart was the dramatic reenactment of creation, Marduk's triumph over Tiamat, and the renewal of cosmic order. During Akita, the king was ritually humbled, stripped of his regalia, and struck by the high priest, only to be reinstated as chosen by Marduk. This ceremony reminded all that even the most powerful ruler depended on divine approval for legitimacy. It was theater, religion, and politics fused into one. In such moments, the Babylonians experienced time as cyclical, where chaos was defeated and order restored year after year. Other rituals governed daily life. Families made offerings to household gods, merchants prayed for safe journeys, and soldiers sought blessings before battle. Divination, too, was a central practice. Priests read the movement of stars, the flight of birds, or the entrails of sacrificed animals to discern the will of the gods. Far from superstition, this was considered a sophisticated science. Astronomy and astrology grew out of these practices, with Babylonian scholars charting planetary paths and eclipses. Knowledge of the heavens was both spiritual and practical, shaping calendars, agriculture, and even imperial decisions. Literature and the quest for meaning. Babylon was also a land of words, for it inherited and preserved the great literary tradition of Mesopotamia, chief among them the Epic of Gilgamesh. Cuneiform writing inscribed on clay tablets was the lifeblood of Babylonian culture. Thousands of these tablets have survived, giving us contracts, hymns, myths, astronomical records, and personal letters. Writing was not merely practical, it was sacred for the Babylonians. To record was to preserve truth, to give permanence to fleeting moments. The scribes who mastered this art occupied an honored place in society, standing at the intersection of administration, culture, and spirituality. Law and order in the land of Babylon. Justice meant balance and proportion, ensuring that wrongs were met with punishments appropriate to their severity. The laws covered every aspect of life: ownership, trade, marriage, inheritance, assault, and slavery. They protected property, established responsibility for contracts, and regulated wages and debts. They also reinforced social hierarchy, prescribing different penalties depending on one's class. Yet despite these inequalities, the code marked a critical shift. It turned justice from a private affair of vengeance into a public system administered by the state. It was a step toward the idea that the law stands above even the king himself. Administration in Babylon was sophisticated and deeply tied to record-keeping. Armies of scribes recorded taxes, grain stores, and labor obligations on clay tablets. Bureaucrats managed irrigation canals, collected tributes from provinces, and ensured supplies flowed to temples and palaces. This system allowed Babylon to function not just as a city but as the capital of a vast territory. Without it, the grandeur of temples and palaces would have collapsed under the weight of disorder. It was this marriage of faith and bureaucracy that gave Babylon both its spiritual aura and its practical strength. Legacy of Babylonian culture and law. The cultural and religious life of Babylon left deep marks on human history. The myths of Marduk, Ishtar, and Gilgamesh shaped later traditions, influencing Hebrew, Greek, and even modern literature. Babylonian astronomy laid foundations for science, while its laws inspired later legal codes. The city Ziggurats foreshadowed monumental architecture across empires, and its rituals demonstrated how religion could legitimize political power even after Babylon fell to the Persians. Its reputation endured. The Bible remembered it as both a place of exile and decadence. Greek historians wrote of its wonders, and modern archaeologists continue to uncover its secrets. To speak of Babylonian culture and religion is to speak of humanity's struggle to find meaning in a fragile world through gods, myths, festivals, and laws. The Babylonians sought to bring order to chaos, to give permanence to fleeting lives. Their legacy reminds us that culture is not just monuments or texts, it is the living fabric of beliefs and practices that shape who we are. Babylon built walls and palaces, but more enduring than stone was the civilization it wove in words, rituals, and laws. A civilization whose echoes still reach us thousands of years later. Political organization and power. The story of Babylon is not only one of culture and religion but also of political ambition and statecraft. From its beginnings as a modest city-state along the Euphrates, Babylon gradually rose to command vast territories through a combination of diplomacy, military strength, and religious legitimacy. Its political organization reflected both the pragmatic needs of governance and the deeply spiritual worldview of its people, where kingship was not merely a human institution but a sacred mandate. In its earliest phase, Babylon functioned like many other Mesopotamian city-states, a walled urban center surrounded by agricultural lands, governed by a local ruler. Competition among cities such as Uruk, and Larsa was fierce, with shifting alliances and frequent wars. Babylon's strategic position along trade routes and the fertile banks of the Euphrates gave it both economic potential and military advantage. Over time, its leaders capitalized on this position, forging alliances and subduing rivals to expand their sphere of influence. The true political ascent of Babylon occurred under Hammurabi, 1792 to 1750 BCE. Hammurabi was both a warrior and a statesman, known not only for his conquests but also for his administrative reforms. Through a series of campaigns, he united much of Mesopotamia under Babylonian rule, bringing together diverse peoples and territories into a single political entity. Hammurabi's genius lay not only in military victories but also in consolidating power through law and administration. By issuing the famous Code of Hammurabi, he established a framework of justice that bound his subjects together under a common standard. This legal unification reinforced his political authority, making Babylon not just a dominant city but the heart of a true empire. Under Hammurabi, Babylon became the capital of a realm stretching across Mesopotamia, symbolizing both political strength and divine order. The Neo-Babylonian resurgence. Centuries after Hammurabi, Babylon once again reached new heights during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, 626 to 539 BCE. Under the leadership of Nebuchadnezzar II, 605 to 562 BCE, the city transformed into a political and cultural marvel. Nebuchadnezzar consolidated control over the entire Euphrates basin, securing borders, strengthening fortifications, and maintaining a powerful army. He also expanded Babylon's influence abroad, conquering Judah and famously destroying Jerusalem in 586 BCE, leading to the Babylonian captivity of the Jewish people. These conquests not only enhanced Babylon's prestige but also demonstrated its role as a regional superpower, capable of shaping the political landscape of the ancient Near East. Nebuchadnezzar's reign was characterized by both martial strength and monumental architecture. By building grand temples, palaces, and the legendary Hanging Gardens, he reinforced Babylon's image as a city favored by the gods, a tangible display of both political and divine power. In Babylon, kingship was more than a political office, it was a sacred duty. The king was regarded as the earthly representative of Marduk, the supreme god of the Babylonian pantheon. His authority derived not just from conquest or governance but from his perceived role as the mediator between the divine and human realms. This belief system provided a powerful tool for political cohesion. By presenting himself as Marduk's chosen ruler, the king ensured the loyalty of his subjects, who saw obedience not merely as civic duty but as religious devotion. During festivals such as Akitu, the king publicly reaffirmed his humility before Marduk, symbolizing that his power was granted by the gods and renewed each year. In this way, religion and politics were inseparable, each reinforcing the other. To govern such vast territories, Babylonian rulers relied on a structured administrative system. Provincial governors, scribes, and military commanders were appointed to oversee taxation, resource management, and local justice. Records were meticulously kept on clay tablets, ensuring that grain supplies, trade exchanges, and labor obligations were monitored. This bureaucracy allowed the king to maintain control across distant regions, preventing rebellion and ensuring steady economic flow into the capital. The military was also central to Babylon's political power. Armies were not only instruments of conquest but also guardians of internal order. Soldiers defended irrigation systems, secured trade routes, and enforced royal decrees. Their loyalty was tied to the king, who provided them with spoils of war, land, or privileges in return. The fusion of power and legacy, the fusion of political might with religious legitimacy, gave Babylon a unique resilience. Even when dynasties shifted or foreign powers briefly occupied the region, the image of Babylon as the seat of divine kingship endured. The city became a symbol of authority, remembered by later cultures not only for its walls and gardens but also for the political vision that placed the king at the center of both cosmic and earthly order. Ultimately, Babylon's political organization and power were not merely about armies or laws. They were about creating a system where every aspect of society, from religion to economics, reinforced the authority of the king and the supremacy of the city. This synthesis of the spiritual and the political ensured Babylon's place as one of the most influential civilizations of the ancient world. Economy and trade. If religion and kingship gave Babylon its identity, it was the economy that provided the lifeblood of the empire. Babylon was not only a city of gods and kings, it was also a city of farmers, merchants, artisans, and bankers. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, Babylon sat at the crossroads of ancient trade routes. Its fertile land, sophisticated irrigation systems, and bustling marketplaces transformed it into one of the most prosperous centers of the ancient Near East. The economy of Babylon was not static, it evolved over centuries, adapting to the challenges of geography, climate, and international politics, while leaving behind practices that influenced commerce for millennia. Agriculture, foundation of prosperity. At the heart of Babylonian wealth was agriculture. The land around the Euphrates was naturally fertile, but the irregular floods of the river made farming unpredictable. To overcome this, the Babylonians developed advanced irrigation systems, canals, levees, and reservoirs that allowed them to control the flow of water, turning floodplains into reliable farmland. The chief crops were barley and wheat, staples of the Mesopotamian diet. Barley, in particular, was so central that it not only fed the population but also functioned as a unit of currency. Alongside grains, dates from palm trees became an essential food source, rich in calories and easily stored. Palm trees also provided wood, fibers, and even sap for fermentation. Flax was cultivated for linen, which supplied both domestic needs and international trade. Agricultural surpluses allowed the population of Babylon to grow and supported non-farming professions. Farmers paid a portion of their crops as taxes, filling royal granaries and temple stores, which in turn sustained soldiers, officials, and laborers engaged in building the monumental ziggurats and city walls that defined Babylon's skyline. In essence, the abundance of the soil was transformed into political and cultural power. International trade, the arteries of empire. While Babylon's fields produced food in plenty, its land lacked many essential natural resources. There was little wood for construction, few minerals for tools, and no precious stones for jewelry. This scarcity pushed the Babylonians outward, forging trade connections that stretched across thousands of miles. From the mountains of Afghanistan, caravans brought lapis lazuli, the deep blue gemstone prized for amulets and luxury goods. From Lebanon, traders floated down the Euphrates with cedar wood, valued for its durability and fragrance, essential in temple construction and shipbuilding. From Oman and the Persian Gulf, merchants imported copper, while from Anatolia, they acquired tin. When alloyed together, copper and tin produced bronze, the metal of tools and weapons that underpinned both economy and military. Babylon thus became a cosmopolitan hub, where goods, languages, and ideas converged. Merchants from distant lands mingled in its markets, exchanging exotic products alongside local wares. The city's strategic position between East and West made it not only a consumer but also a redistributor, acting as a middleman in the ancient world's earliest international economy. Money, credit, and contracts. One of Babylon's greatest contributions to economic history was the development of sophisticated financial practices. Unlike purely barter-based economies, Babylon used silver and barley as standardized units of exchange. Silver was weighed in shekels, and its value was carefully regulated. Even more striking was the emergence of credit and banking practices. Wealthy merchants, temples, and private households acted as lenders, offering silver or grain loans to farmers, traders, and craftsmen. Interest rates were often around 20%, a rate high enough to ensure profit but not so high as to strangle borrowers. Contracts were drawn up on clay tablets, sealed with cylinder seals, and stored as legal records. These contracts detailed not only loans but also partnerships, rental agreements, and marriage dowries. The clarity and permanence of these documents helped build trust in transactions and created a foundation for long-term economic growth. In many ways, Babylon was one of the first societies to practice what we might recognize as banking, laying the groundwork for later civilization systems of finance. Markets and crafts, the heartbeat of daily life beyond the fields and trade caravans, it was in the markets of Babylon that economic life came alive. These bustling centers were filled with stalls selling grain, dates, wool, beer, spices, and luxury goods. Merchants shouted prices, scribes recorded transactions, and craftsmen displayed their work to potential buyers. Craft industries flourished. Potters created durable vessels for storage and transport. Weavers produced fine textiles, including linen and wool, some dyed in vibrant colors for the elite. Jewelers shaped imported lapis lazuli, carnelian, and gold into necklaces and rings that adorned the nobility. Metalworkers forged tools, weapons, and decorative items. Each craft was often organized into guild-like groups, ensuring quality and protecting trade secrets. These crafts not only supplied Babylon itself but also contributed to its export trade. Babylonian textiles, in particular, became prized items throughout the ancient Near East. Temples as economic centers. Religion and economy were deeply intertwined. Temples were not merely places of worship, they were also among the largest landowners and economic institutions in Babylon. They managed vast estates, employed farmers and craftsmen, stored surplus grain, and engaged in trade. Temples lent silver and barley, charging interest much like private lenders, and acted as both spiritual and financial anchors of the community. Through their dual role, temples reinforced the fusion of divine authority and material prosperity. To pay taxes or offer tithes to the temple was both an act of civic duty and a religious obligation. Challenges and resilience. Babylon's economy, though advanced, faced constant challenges. Irrigation required constant maintenance, and neglect could lead to salinization of soil, reducing yields. Trade routes were vulnerable to banditry and warfare, requiring strong military protection. Periodic invasions or political upheavals disrupted markets and strained financial systems. Yet the resilience of Babylonian economic structures ensured recovery. Even after foreign conquests, the city often rebounded as a commercial center, because its location and institutions were simply too valuable to be abandoned. Legacy of Babylonian economy. The economic innovations of Babylon did not vanish with its political decline. Concepts of standardized currency, written contracts, credit, and interest spread throughout the Near East and into later civilizations, influencing Greek, Persian, and even Roman economic practices. The integration of agriculture, trade, finance, and craftsmanship into a coherent system remains one of Babylon's most enduring legacies. Babylon's economy was far more than the background to its grand temples and conquests, it was the invisible force that sustained the empire. Fields of barley fed armies, trade routes brought wealth and prestige, silver contracts ensured trust, and vibrant markets created the pulse of urban life. In the story of Babylon, the economy was not just the foundation of daily existence, it was the engine of empire, driving the city to become one of the most dazzling centers of the ancient world. Military and conquest. Babylon, though most celebrated for its architecture, literature, and law, was also a formidable military power whose armies played a decisive role in shaping Mesopotamian history. Its reputation rested not only on economic prosperity and cultural influence but also on a disciplined and organized military. Babylonian forces were known for their professional structure, use of bronze weaponry, and flexible tactics that allowed them to confront both rival city-states and imperial powers. The earliest phase of Babylonian military prominence emerged under the reign of Hammurabi, who ruled from 1792 to 1750 BCE. Hammurabi is remembered primarily for his legal code, but it was his ability to wage war effectively that enabled him to unify much of Mesopotamia. When Hammurabi came to the throne, Babylon was still a relatively modest city-state, surrounded by stronger rivals such as Larsa, Eshnunna, and Mari. Through a series of calculated campaigns, Hammurabi brought these states under his control. He first secured alliances, often through diplomacy, but when rivals grew weak or broke treaties, Babylon struck decisively. His armies deployed spearmen, archers, and axemen equipped with bronze-tipped weapons. Shields made of wood and covered with animal hide provided protection, while disciplined formations allowed Babylonian soldiers to maintain cohesion on the battlefield. Hammurabi's forces combined straightforward infantry assaults with ambushes and siege tactics, enabling them to break through city walls and overwhelm fortified towns. By the end of his reign, Hammurabi had transformed Babylon from a regional player into the dominant power of Mesopotamia. His empire stretched across nearly all of southern and central Mesopotamia, secured by both military conquest and the authority of his new legal system. The Second Golden Age of Babylonian military power occurred during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, particularly under Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned from 605 to 562 BCE. This period represented the peak of Babylonian military organization and strategy. By this time, iron weaponry had supplemented bronze, and the Babylonians had integrated more complex units into their armies. Chariots, drawn by horses, became crucial on the battlefield, allowing rapid maneuvers and devastating charges. Cavalry units, relatively new to Mesopotamian warfare, gave Babylon additional speed and flexibility against enemies like the Assyrians. Nebuchadnezzar II invested heavily in fortifications and defense, aware that Babylon's central location made it vulnerable to foreign attack. He built massive city walls, including the famous double and triple fortification systems that encircled Babylon, making it one of the most secure cities of the ancient world. These fortifications not only defended the capital but also symbolized Babylon's power, sending a message to rivals that the city was impregnable. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon conducted significant campaigns against both local rivals and foreign states. One of the most famous was his war against the remnants of the Assyrian Empire, which had dominated Mesopotamia for centuries. With the decline of Assyria in the late 7th century BCE, Babylon, allied with the Medes, struck decisively and destroyed the Assyrian capital Nineveh in 612 BCE. This marked the end of Assyrian dominance and the beginning of Babylon's rise as the leading power of the Near East. Another hallmark of Babylonian conquest was its expansion into the Levant. Nebuchadnezzar campaigned repeatedly in Judah, eventually capturing Jerusalem in 587 BCE after a prolonged siege. The city was destroyed, the Temple of Solomon was burned, and much of the population was deported to Babylon, a traumatic event remembered in the Hebrew Bible as the Babylonian captivity. This act demonstrated not only Babylon's military might but also its ability to project power far beyond Mesopotamia. Control over Judah gave Babylon access to vital trade routes and strengthened its influence in the eastern Mediterranean. The Neo-Babylonian army was not only offensive but also defensive. Babylon's walls, combined with its strategic use of rivers and canals, made the city one of the hardest to besiege. The Euphrates River ran directly through the city, ensuring water supplies and supporting defensive moats. Towers and gates were heavily fortified, providing vantage points for archers and defenders. The sheer scale of Babylon's defenses contributed to its reputation as an unconquerable city, though history would later prove otherwise. By the time of Nebuchadnezzar's death, Babylon had become the dominant force in Mesopotamia once again, a position it had not enjoyed since the age of Hammurabi. The military, blending tradition with innovation, enabled this resurgence and secured Babylon's place as the last great empire of Mesopotamian civilization. 7. Invasions and decline. Despite its strength, Babylon was not immune to the cycles of conquest and decline that characterized Mesopotamian history. Over the centuries, the city faced repeated invasions, occupations, and eventual downfall, each leaving its mark on Babylonian society. The first major blow came in 1595 BCE, when the Hittites, a rising power from Anatolia, launched a sudden raid on Babylon. Their armies, equipped with advanced chariot technology and iron weapons, penetrated Babylon's defenses and plundered the city. Although the Hittites did not remain to establish long-term control, their attack destabilized Babylon and ended the Amorite dynasty founded by Hammurabi. In the power vacuum that followed, the Kassites, a people from the Zagros Mountains, gradually assumed control and ruled Babylon for several centuries. In the 7th century BCE, Babylon again faced domination, this time from the mighty Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians, renowned for their brutal military campaigns and vast empire, incorporated Babylon into their realm, often treating the city with suspicion. Babylon was both a jewel and a thorn in the Assyrian crown, rich in culture but restless under foreign rule. Assyrian kings alternated between destroying Babylon, as Sennacherib did in 689 BCE, and restoring it, as his successors Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal attempted, in an effort to maintain legitimacy. The Assyrian occupation underscored Babylon's vulnerability despite its grandeur, but also its resilience, as the city consistently reasserted itself once Assyrian power waned. The final and most decisive conquest occurred in 539 BCE, when Babylon fell to the Persians under Cyrus the Great of the Achaemenid Empire. According to historical accounts, Cyrus entered Babylon without significant resistance, aided by internal discontent, and possibly by engineering works that diverted the Euphrates River, allowing Persian troops to enter through the riverbed. This conquest ended Babylon's independence once and for all, as it became a vital province of the Persian Empire. Unlike the Hittites or Assyrians, however, the Persians respected Babylonian traditions, maintaining the city as a cultural and administrative center. Cyrus even permitted exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands, marking a sharp contrast with Babylonian policies of forced deportation. Although Babylon never regained its independence after 539 BCE, its legacy continued to shine. The city remained a symbol of magnificence, famed for its monumental walls, temples, and legendary hanging gardens. Even under Persian, Greek, and later Parthian rule, Babylon was remembered as a marvel of human achievement, blending military strength, political authority, and cultural splendor. Babylon has long since vanished from the map, yet its influence continues to echo across history and into our modern world. Few civilizations have left such a profound and lasting imprint on human culture, law, science, and imagination. One of Babylon's most enduring contributions was writing. The Babylonians adopted and perfected cuneiform, a wedge-shaped script inscribed on clay tablets. This was not merely a tool for record-keeping, it was the very foundation of history, literature, and cultural memory. Thanks to cuneiform, we can still read royal decrees, epic tales, and economic transactions from thousands of years ago. It was the first great step in humanity's journey to preserve knowledge across generations. Equally influential was Babylon's contribution to law. The Code of Hammurabi, carved in stone nearly 4,000 years ago, stands as one of the earliest examples of written legislation. With its principle of an eye for an eye, it sought to establish order and justice in a complex and growing society. More than just punishment, it created the idea that laws should be public, binding not only on the weak but also on the powerful, a revolutionary concept that resonates in modern legal systems worldwide. Architecture and engineering also carried Babylon's legacy forward. The great ziggurats, towering temple structures, dominated city skylines, serving as both sacred places and symbols of authority. Babylon's mighty walls were so legendary that later writers believed they were among the world's wonders. And of course, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, whether myth or reality, became an eternal image of human creativity and the desire to shape beauty even in harsh environments. In science, the Babylonians advanced mathematics and astronomy to extraordinary levels. They introduced the sexagesimal system, the base of 60, that gave us the 60-minute hour and the 360-degree circle. They charted the movements of planets and stars with precision, laying the groundwork for both astronomy and astrology. Their ability to predict celestial events was not only practical for agriculture but also deeply tied to religion and kingship. Babylon's literature, especially the Epic of Gilgamesh, carried profound reflections on life, death, and the human search for meaning. Its myths and stories influenced neighboring cultures and, indirectly, traditions that shape our world even today. Babylon was, and remains, a symbol of power, wisdom, religion, and creativity, a reminder of how human ambition can shape civilizations. If you find this journey through history inspiring, consider supporting this channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing, so we can continue exploring the stories that shaped humanity.